So, let's get on with this. The Waystone flung the champions from the depths of the Maw straight to the heart of the Shadowlands, Oribos, the Eternal City. At first, Ka-Sher and Ka-Delen, overseers of Oribos, believed the heroes were agents of the Maw, come to attack the city. Upon realizing they beheld living beings, they were shocked. Not only mortals... Oh, God, we got to start the mortal counter up. I just realized. Okay, mortals who... Shadowlands is all about the mortals, let me tell you what. Not only mortals now walked the realm of death, but they had somehow escaped the inescapable Maw. While the inhabitants of the Eternal City puzzled over these newcomers, Tal Inara, voice of the Arbiter, approached, informing everyone the hero's presence in Oribos had caused the Arbiter to stir, something that had not happened for a very long time. She hoped these Maw walkers might lend insight to the crisis at hand that had for years consumed the thoughts of the Eternal City's inhabitants. Tal Inara was never meant to be a leader, but merely a speaker for the Arbiter, the voiceless entity that had assumed Zoval's role of sending out souls to their proper afterlives. Repetition. She led Oribos since the Arbiter had been rendered inert. Without the Arbiter, the souls of the dead, kind and cruel alike, could not be assigned to an afterlife, and were instead flowing directly into the Maw. To make matters worse, the realms of the dead were powered by the essence of the mortal souls, called anima. Some souls had more or less anima, depending on the greatness of their deeds in life, whether good or ill. With no souls and no anima entering the various afterlives, the Shadowlands slowly starved. As the jailer's realm grew in power, the others withered, and their inhabitants, who were nourished by anima, were ceasing to exist. If the situation were not remedied, the elaborate, balanced machinery of the afterlives would shatter, and all souls would face eternal torment in the Maw. Seeing the champion's arrival had roused the Arbiter, they brought them before her, but nothing happened. Talinara's hope was dashed, but her overseers escorted the champions to a device that could establish a portal from Oribos to Azeroth using the shard of the Helm of Domination. With the way opened, High Lord Bolvar and his Death Knights made their way to Oribos. Tal Inara listened to the hero's tale about Sylvanas shattering the helm and the sky, followed by the abduction of the world's leaders by the winged Moss-sworn creature. Tal Inara recognized these dark creatures... It's just bowings. Talinara recognized these dark creatures as being akin to the noble Kyrian of Bastion. The voice of the Arbiter believed that Archon Kyrestia, leader of the Bastion and one of the Eternal Ones, could offer more insight into what role, if any, the jailer might have in corrupting Kyrians to his own ends. Her overseers spared what little anima they could to open the portal to Bastion, so the champions might continue their investigation. Now, two things while we head off to our next zone. First thing, probably the most important. I read a couple of passages for my sister, who I remind you is a teacher who teaches, among other things, English. And she immediately and without prompting nailed exactly what I've been saying this entire time. This book didn't have an editor. Now, obviously, it had an editor because there's one credited, but it didn't have an editing pass. I'm sorry. Maybe they just didn't have time, or maybe they didn't have, the funding necessary, or the support, or whatever. I hate to place the blame on one person, but this book lacks editing, whatever else was put onto that. Second thing I wanted to share really quick is I actually find the entire concept of how this afterlife functions fascinating, even though it has a few holes in it. So, the people exist, then they die. Once they die, they are brought here to be sent to one of the various portions of the afterlife. To be either... So, I'm saying this wrong. There's an initial filter, right? The initial filter comes through, and it's like, okay, are you evil or good? It's a fairly basic thing, but that is the initial filter. Are you someone who needs to be redeemed or not? This is fairly standard. A lot of fictional settings do this exact same kind of concept. Forgotten Realms, for example. So, there we go. So, do you need to be redeemed or not? If you don't need to be redeemed, then all of your good deeds diffuse out into the afterlife you are sent to become part of the anima, which is the essence of everything that's being made here. Make sense? So all this crap is made of good anima from people who are of the more judgmental art. God, that water bug is bad. Look at that nonsense. Ugh. Anyways, let's find a good spot for Bastion here. So that makes sense. If you are someone who needs to be redeemed, you are sent to the redemption place, which we'll get to later. And while there, you will go through the redemption process. While doing so, they bleed out the anima from you in the form of the energy from your deeds, in this case, evil deeds, right? If you're a murderer, a mass murderer, or whatever, if you're Garrosh, bleed that out, which then provides anima for that particular realm. Once you are redeemed, you are then sent to the new realm, where you become part of the new realm cycle, and if you are not redeemed, you're cast into the maw because you're considered unredeemable, which is pretty horrific. But the whole thing feels like a factory, doesn't it? In kind of a good way, as weird as that sounds. It's fascinating. Horrifying. Probably needs to be overturned. But still fascinating in how it's constructed. Of all the things about the Shadowlands that sucked, the mechanisms of the afterlife were reasonably well constructed. Anyways. Shortly after their arrival, the champions were greeted by a Kyrian named Clea, who was startled to learn that a way from Oribos had opened and the Kyrians had seemingly allied with the Jailer. To gain audience with the Archon, however, the heroes would need to walk the path, a series of spiritual trials by which the souls, known as aspirants, became ascended, able to execute their charge of ferrying souls to the Arbiter for judgment. To ascend, aspirants must willingly purge themselves of all attachment to their mortal lives, surrendering their memories or even having those memories stripped of them. Those who could not complete the path could have their negative emotions or memories cleansed at the Temple of Purity, while those who turned from the path were sent to the Temple of Loyalty to receive greater support. Other temples dedicated to wisdom, humility, and courage existed in Bastion too, each with a paragon leading its functions. The paragons were long-ascended Kyrians who stood as the embodiment of these virtues and ensured the denizens of Bastion upheld them. While learning about the path, the champions met with Pelagos, Clea's soulbind. Clea and Pelagos had undergone a ritual to unite their souls, making both stronger and laying all bare before the other. Each Kyrian underwent this process, as did many denizens in the Shadowlands. Pelagos, too, was an aspirant struggling to complete his final rites. He and Clea accompanied the champions to this aspirant's crucible, where they underwent training and cleansing. Since the Arbiter had fallen, none in Bastion had ascended, but the champions of Azeroth succeeded in all the trials set before them. Although this achievement was worthy of note, the Archon granted them only a gift and not an audience. With no other recourse, the heroes agreed to offer their aid to whatever was required. Overwhelmed by souls unable to ascend, the Temple of Purity was in dire need of help. With aid from the temple's acolytes, flagging aspirants could call forth and defeat their negative emotions as they would any enemy, but as champions set themselves to this task, the temple came under attack. The Forsworn, Kyrians who opposed the path, unwilling to abandon their mortal memories, converged on the Temple of Purity with a series of targeted attacks. They corrupted the massive Vespers that hung throughout the realm. That would be, those things, I think? I'm not actually sure what those are. Maybe those are the Vespers? Man, I don't know. Something or the Vespers. Look, just go with it. Just go with it. Everything's cool. Everything's fine. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. They corrupted the Vespers. I lost track. Sorry. They corrupted the massive Vespers that hung throughout the realm, causing negative emotion to burst forth from every aspirant. The heroes of Azeroth aided the Kyrians in their fight, cleansing the Vespers and culling the aspirant's swarm of dark memories and emotions. Confronting Lysonia, leader of the Forsworn, yielded new revelations. Lysonia had once been the paragon of loyalty, but had since been declared herself the Hand of Doubt. After the champions freed Vesiphone, the paragon of purity, fend off the attack, Lysonia left behind a fragment of her negative emotions. This fragment was useless on its own, but viewing it with the help of a soul mirror enabled the heroes to see Lysonia's memory clearly. The fragment proved Lysonia had pledged to the Forsworn to the Jailer, though most of the individual souls who followed Lysonia did not know of the deal she'd struck. This development at last captured the attention of the Archon Kyrestia, and she granted the champions an audience in the Elysian Hold. Although the Archon had disregarded warnings about the Forsworn in the past, she called for vigilance against her forces in light of the recent attack and this new evidence. The rebel Kyrians had invaded Bastion's wards, and until the methods were discovered, the entire realm remained under threat. All seemed well until Uther the Lightbringer, a paladin of Azeroth and Light who had joined the Forsworn, disabled the ward protecting the Temple of Courage, and the Jailer's allies poured through. By the way, real quick, did you happen to notice that the Jailer just kind of has allies amongst them? I've actually talked about this recently in the Trek lore run, believe it or not. There's this concept called the Ever-Loyal Minion. I don't know if that's actually what it's called. I just made up that term right now 5 seconds ago. The Ever-Loyal Minion, it's kind of exactly what it sounds like. It's something that fiction uses entirely too much, where there's the minion of the bad guy, and they're loyal to the bad guy. And they need to be loyal to the bad guy, usually for plot reasons, because the bad guy's motives or plots or actions or whatever cannot go forward without the actions of this minion. Right? You could probably think of a dozen examples off the top of your head. Now, a good story will establish reasoning and motive. Why is that minion so loyal? Why are they so adherent to the cause? Are they true believers? Do they owe this person a tremendous debt? Do they care about them significantly? Or do they have their own ulterior objective they're trying to accomplish, etc.? A bad story will not establish any reason whatsoever for this loyalty. Instead, that loyalty is presumed because, well, that's what happens in fiction. When an evil overlord has minions, those minions are loyal. That's just normal. And so nobody really questions it. Instead, they're just loyal. So explain something to me, those of you in chat. How did the jailer gain all of its minions? By what method did he procure their undying loyalty, even to the end? Thank you, Anarchomaxist. I really want to finish this damn book. All seemed well, but then the invasion that was attacking the Temple of Courage was led not by the Mossworn, but by the Necrolord warriors from Maldraxxus. The Archon could not fathom this betrayal. The Necrolords were ever the defenders of the Shadowlands, yet they were waging war on the very beings they were meant to protect. The fighting was fierce. The Kyrians were powerful warriors, but defending themselves against both Maldraxxus and the Forsworn in short order without anima to power their constructs or forges nearly overwhelmed them. Even more disturbing, the champions soon received word that the Necrolords were harvesting Kyrian, living or dead, for use in their armies. One Maldraxxus corrupt necromancer even warped Thanakos, an ascended Kyrian, into a fearsome undead monstrosity before his comrades' very eyes. Still, the heroes of Azeroth stood with Bastion, and through their efforts the enemy was forced to retreat, though the Forsworn and Maldraxxus were far from defeated. With a temporary but stable... Why does it keep going? This is a really frustrating bug. Just gonna switch this over here for now. Jesus, if this keeps coming up. Damn. Oh man, my throat's killing me. Warcraft, trust me. So yeah, this is Maldraxxus. Nice place. Very bony. We'll use that as a shot. That'll work. With a temporary but stable peace in Bastion, the mortal champions returned to Oribos with what news of what had transpired. Maldraxxus' attack on the Bastion was a dire and immediate threat to all of the Shadowlands. With haste, Talinara dispatched the champions to Maldraxxus to recover information about the state of the realm and bring a stop to further violence. As the realm responsible for safeguarding the Shadowlands from outside forces, Maldraxxus was in a place of constant turmoil, where souls who thrived on battle in life continued to hone their craft in conflict with one another. The Primus, the Eternal One who ruled this realm, had long ago divided Maldraxxus into 5 noble houses, each with its own vital role. The House of Constructs valued power over all else. Here, fleshcrafters molded necrotic constructs to crush their enemies in battle or added stronger parts to their decomposing warriors. Many of their members had long ago twisted themselves into necromantic abominations to increase their battle prowess. The constructs had close ties to the House of Rituals, whose the gift with necromancy found purchase and power. The House of Eyes was marked with souls with cunning, keen observation, and intellect. Their ranks swelled with the Shadowlands spies, gathering critical information to better defend the realms of death. Those souls with a curious mind for experimentation made their home in the House of Plagues, where potions, poisons, and disease were leveraged to craft weapons that death's enemies could neither see nor fight. Last of all, the House of the Chosen contributed the type of warrior most recognized to the citizens of Azeroth. Blacksmiths who owned armor and weaponry, warriors who thrived in the thick of battle, and tacticians who defended the afterlives with sharp strategy and determination. The Primus imparted a small portion of his life energy to the leaders of each of the 5 houses, whom he called the Margraves. With the Primus guiding them, the Margraves maintained an uneasy but steady truce across the land. Any disputes were resolved by armed conflict, which strengthened both parties. The Primus had been the first of the Eternal Ones to suspect the Jailer's involvement in slow unraveling of the Shadowlands. Some time ago he decided to travel to the Maw and confront the Jailer, but he never returned. In the time following the Primus' disappearance, the 5 houses of Maldraxxus had descended into civil war. The Lich Kel'Thuzad, who in life is one of the best characters in the entire franchise, had been working for the Jailer, and he took full advantage of the Primus' absence. Oh yeah, by the way, why is Kel'Thuzad loyal to the Jailer? Notice this, by the way. Each of the 4 zones has one rogue faction loyal to the jailer for no reason. No reason ever given. It gets worse when we get to the 4th zone. He orchestrated an alliance between his own House of Rituals and the House of Constructs in an attempt to conquer the other 3 factions. They struck first in the House of Plagues, and after its fall, turned on the House of Eyes. With only one house standing against them, they abandoned any illusion of loyalty to the Eternal Ones and joined with the Forsworn to invade Bastion. In Maldraxxus, only elite warriors within the House of the Chosen remained largely uncorrupted, faithful to the Primus and their original purpose. They continued their search for the Eternal One, hoping he could restore the balance in Maldraxxus. Here again, the champions heard the familiar name among its army. Following her death at the hands of the Shadow Council, the soul of Draka, mother of Thrall, had been sent to Maldraxxus and the House of Ives, where she served well as a spy and assassin. Its Margrave, Akarek, was concerned after hearing about the fall of the House of Plagues, and suspicion that a greater plot may be at work. Seeking allies, he sent Draka on a diplomatic mission to the House of the Chosen. However, while she acted on this objective, the House of Eyes was struck and toppled, just as the House of Plagues had. With the end of her house, Margrave Crexus of the Chosen took Draka in, and she thrived as a baroness there, proving herself an excellent spy and formidable warrior. Upon their arrival in Maldraxxus, Draka watched the champions closely, noting them to be enemies of the House of Constructs and Rituals. She rescued the heroes from the crosshairs of these factions and brought them before Crexus, who readily accepted them. He did, however, ask these new allies to undergo a challenge. For eons, members of the House of Chosen had distinguished themselves with a test of endurance to reach the standing rock at the heart of their citadel, placed there by the Primus long ago. When the champions succeeded in touching the stone, they were granted a vision, oh crap, of the Eternal One and a prophecy warning against treachery. The rock shattered, revealing an unfinished blade within. The Primus had anticipated such a day like this would come, when the Shadowlands would require the aid of powerful souls. He had enchanted the stone so that only those worthy of the task set before them could claim the blade. Margrave Crexus was greatly enheartened by this discovery. Though he did not know the artifact's purpose, he suspected it was connected to the seed of the Primus. Once the unfinished blade had been given a hilt, Crexus knew his hunch to be correct. It was a rune blade, and the 5 runes upon it matched those that had sealed the seed of the Primus. Although one of the runes was empowered, the other 4 remained dormant. Crexus believed that empowering all the runes would open the door to the seed of the Primus, saving not only the House of the Chosen, but all of Maldraxxus. What it actually says is, and indeed all of it Maldraxxus. Excuse me. I need to stop editorializing. I apologize. The seat was said to contain a vast arsenal of the Primus's greatest weapons, which could greatly empower the Chosen's warriors. Upon arriving at the seat, the blade's single empowered rune, the Rune of Ambition, transferred to the lock above the door. While the Margrave considered how the remaining runes might be empowered, he bade the champions recruit new allies to their cause before the House of Construct and Rituals could destroy them. Draka knew where to find one such ally. Lady Vosh was a Naga who, alongside Draka, had served the other Baroness to the House of Eyes. When the champions located Lady Vosh, whom they had encountered and slayed in life, she agreed to join her forces to the House of the Chosen for a price. She demanded the head of the Lich Morbiton of the House of Rituals, who had been instrumental in the fall of the House of Eyes. With the champions' help, Lady Vosh lured out Morbiton in an intricate plot and took her revenge. With this act, the champions gained both a new ally for the Chosen as well as the Rune of Guile. Draka next directed the heroes to the House of Plagues, where the Chosen's scouts had recently reported activity in its fallen necropolis. If the survivors of the house were gathered there, this presented a valuable opportunity for recruitment. The champions ventured to the ruined necropolis, surprised to learn that at least one half-mad plagued deviser, Merilith, was still carrying forward the mission of his house, and still tending to his Margrave, Shadama, whom all of Maldraxxus believed to be dead. The Plague Deviser's old journals disclosed who had betrayed the House of Plagues. It was the House of Rituals, who had offered to provide anima to the plagues amid the drought. Sensing betrayal, Merilith had devised a potion to protect Margrave Shadama, but had been unable to complete it before the fall of his house. Now, unhinged with the grief and weight of all that had transpired. This is a little loud. Can you get like a little bit less loud, please? Thank you. Jesus. Always with the drums, huh? Where the hell was I? Now unhinged with the grief and weight of all that had transpired, he still sought the champion's help in concocting the potion. Setting the lab to rights, gathering ingredients, and brewing the tincture earned the heroes the Rune of Insight, along with a terrible revelation. Margrave Shadama was indeed lost. The potion had merely summoned her essence back to Merilith. She urged Merilith to forgive himself and vanished. With this, the Plague Deviser agreed to accompany the heroes back to the Bleak Redoubt. Before the champions could recruit more allies, Baron Vyraz, the other Baron of the House of the Chosen beside Draka, requested they join in the attack against the House of Constructs to push the assault into the house itself. The champions entered an uneven, tumultuous battle in which the Chosen were far outmatched. Realizing it would not be possible to enter the house directly, they found another way in, posing as a corpse to infiltrate the Construct's fortress via their grisly body banks. Collected for parts, the champions and their allies fought their way through the stronghold, making a grim discovery. The faction was not only using Maldraxxus flesh to augment their construct, Kyrians, both alive and dead, had been kidnapped or scavenged from battle at the Temple of Courage and harvested for parts. Before them lay evidence that the House of Constructs was behind the attack on the Bastion. A soul-fused construct of Kyrian flesh and souls took aim at the champion. After fighting for control of the abomination, the champions used the construct to blast their way out of the house and kill one of the construct's barons. In so doing, they empowered the fourth rune, the Rune of Might. Only one rune remained. Proud of their success, Draka escorted the champions back to Crexus. They arrived to find the House of House of Chosen in utter carnage. Crexus had been slain and Vyraz, gravely wounded, told them of the House of Constructs attacked. The two barons were in conflict as to how to proceed. More than ever, Draka felt the need to open the seat of the Primus to empower their forces, but Vyraz argued the need to reinforce the numbers immediately with the most powerful warriors. The Baron already had a target in mind. Before Draka had come to the House of the Chosen, the Baron who had preceded her had been lost in battle to the Maw-aligned Maldraxxus. Since the champion had already escaped the Maw once, Vyraz reasoned the champion could return their Baron to them. The heroes agreed to this proposition and left for Oribos, from where they could reach the Maw. Before departing to the Jailer's Realm, Bolvar Fordragon granted them the Amulet of the Horseman, which would aid in locating High Lord Darian Mograine. The Death Knight could prove a valuable ally in their perilous search. Not long after entering the Maw, the champions found and liberated Darian from the Moss-worn cage. Though the High Lord was an asset in evading and eliminating the Jailer's allies, the trail of the Chosen's missing Baron remained cold. Fortunately, the group crossed paths with Venari, one of my favorite characters in Shadowlands, a broker who resided in the Maw outside the Jailer's knowledge. Though many believed the broker race to be native to the Shadowlands, the brokers themselves were dimensional beings who passed through many realms amid their travels. The Shadowlands played host to a large population of brokers due to their wealth of useful information and powerful artifacts, both of which the brokers dealt with. With Venari's help, the champions located the missing Maldraxxus Baron within Perdition Hold, stunned to realize the Baron was Darian's own father, Alexandros Mograine. Years ago, when Alexandros was raised into undeath by the first Lich King, Darian had embarked on a quest to free his father and soul from his clutches. Darian would succeed, though the cost was high. He sacrificed himself in battle, and in a cruel twist, Darian was raised into undeath as one of the Lich King's Death Knights. Much later, with the second Lich King's defeat, Darian rallied his renegade Death Knights to form the Knights of the Ebon Blade. He would later swear his fealty anew, this time as a horseman, to Bolvar. Until this moment in the Maw, however, Darian had assumed he would never see his father again. Fortunately for the champions, both father and son would lend their strength to the Chosen's cause in Maldraxxus. Upon returning to Oribos, Alexandros informed all present, including Draka, that Vyraz had betrayed him. It was he who sent Alexandros to the Maw, and doubtless assumed the heroes of Azeroth would fail in their rescue attempt. Hearing news of Crexus' death, Alexandros was certain that Vyraz had murdered the Margrave. Furious, Draka ordered the champions and Alexandros to eliminate the treacherous Baron, while she informed her troops and rallied them for battle. Arriving at the House of the Chosen, Alexandros demanded Vyraz come forward and fight. At that moment, the final rune, the Rune of the Relentless, was empowered. The battle against Vyraz was fierce, and the cowardly Baron did not hesitate to send his guards forward to fight and die on his behalf. Vastly outnumbered, Draka swooped in to rescue the champions and Alexandros before they could be overwhelmed. She told them Vyraz would have to wait. Their allies were under siege at the seat of the Primus. While the allied Maldraxxus forces held off the Maw-aligned houses, Draka shoved the champions before the door to the seat of the Primus. Vyraz was hard on their heels. The champions had barely reached the door when they saw the Baron approaching, ordering his forces to seize the Runeblade. The champions raised the sword, and the final rune responded, opening the way to what lay within. The voice of the Primus rang out that the foes of the worthy would be vanquished. From overhead, the giant statue that guarded the seat crackled with magic, which shot forth into the battlefield, decimating the enemy. Vyraz was forced to retreat. Inside the seat, a statue of the Primus stood guard over a stone altar. A slot had been carefully carved into the stone, clearly designed for the Runeblade. With the sword placed in the altar, an echo of the Primus spoke again. The Eternal One knew the jailer had turned his chains into a weapon and suspected he was not acting alone. He had ventured forth to stop his brother, but had left the message behind in the event he should fail. He instructed the worthy champion to unite the remaining Eternal Ones, protect the Arbiter at all costs, and prevent the jailer from reaching the Sepulchre. The last time the Eternal Ones had defeated the jailer, they had only managed to succeed by working together. If they wish to do so again, they must reunite. Draka instructed the champions of Azeroth to return to Oribos and deliver them not just the Primus' warning, but the welcome news that the Maldraxxus would no longer be attacking the other afterlives. Draka would remain behind to lead the Undying Army, which would make its base in the seat of the Primus. Her battle, far from done, but it was clear the champions were needed elsewhere. Once in Oribos, the heroes sought out High Lord Bolvar and discovered he had visitors, Kalia Menethil and his daughter Taelia. The two persuaded Bolvar to use the shards of the Helm of Domination to peer into the maw, hoping to learn the fate of those still trapped within. Bolvar was deeply reluctant. It was a dangerous gambit. If the jailer sensed his presence, Bolvar's mind could be destroyed, or worse, dominated. At last he relented, with assistance from the champions. They did not see their imprisoned friends, but they heard the anguished cries of Jaina and Thrall. They also caught a brief glimpse of the jailer and Sylvanas, in which the Banshee Queen revealed the jailer had already learned about the opening of the seat of the Primus. Bolvar withdrew so as to not be discovered. At this, Talinara bade the champions travel to the Ardenweald, so they might deliver these grim tidings to the Winter Queen. Given its primary function, Ardenweald had been uniquely harmed by the anima drought. Drought? Drought. Drought is incorrect. Drought is something you drink from. Drought is something you can't drink from. Its central charge, which is the stewarding of the spirits of nature until they can be reborn in life, consumed large amounts of anima. In brighter times, spirits would enter wild seeds, where the Night Fae tended them with anima offerings from the dream trees. The scarcity of anima, however, decimated the groves of Ardenweald. A great number of wild seeds had died, starving, or else had their essence taken to nurture the heart of the forest, the great tree at the center of the realm. The drought had also emboldened the realm's enemies and forced the Night Fae, and indeed the Winter Queen herself, to make heartbreaking and impossible choices. A fairy named Lady Moonberry met with the champions on their entrance to the realm. Though an audience with the Winter Queen would be difficult to obtain, Lady Moonberry offered to help the champions if he would assist her with the task before her. Heartwood Grove's anima was set to be reclaimed, all but a few of its wild seeds left to wither. After readying the grove, the champions accompanied Lady Moonberry and her fellow Night Fae to the new grove in Tir Naval. Here they received welcome news. The Winter Queen would soon come to bless this grove, but not until preparations were complete. The champions eagerly lent their hands towards readying the grove, clearing the starving wildlife and reclaiming the anima stolen by the Spriggans. Pardon me. Probably one of the prettiest zones. I'd say there's zones that are better designed, but this is probably just the straight-up prettiest zone in the game right here. Plus. The champions had just finished their preparations, and when a stampede of Night Fae were seen fleeing the Heartwood Grove ahead of its culling. The Night Fae there had said that there had been invaded by masked Fae, and the masks had begun appearing on Fae they knew. These masks possessed the wearer, compelling them to attack their own and steal whatever anima they could. Rushing to the grove, the champions succeeded in repelling the masked invaders and saving some of the wild seeds. But the heart of the grove, a special seed that contained all the anima that had been harvested there, had been taken. Even after locating the heart, they found it too had been drained, destroyed by a possessed Fae. As they returned to Tir Naval with word of what had transpired, the champions glimpsed the Winter Queen, but the Eternal One blessed the grove quickly and departed before they could approach her. The heroes of Azeroth better understood now the direness of her realm's situation and wished to do what they could to ease the Winter Queen's burden. They were sent to aid the Wild Hunt, the defenders of Ardenweald, in their pursuit of the masked Fae, as well as the Blighted, a new foe known throughout the realms of death that had been encroaching on the Ardenweald. Fighting alongside Erelon, a Sylvar who had joined the hunt after his grove was culled, the champions encountered the Blighted, recognizing them as a sect of the Droost, a subgroup of Vrykul who had not long ago brought chaos to Kul Tiras using powerful death magic. the blighted Droost seemed to have made it to Ardenweald, and they were extremely loyal to the jailer for, can you guess why? Returning to Tirnaval with these revelations, the heroes found the grove in chaos. The Dreamer, the wild seed the champions had bonded with, had become so distressed it projected its nightmares into reality. With the heroes quelled, while the heroes quelled the wild seed's nightmares, her tenders confirmed she needed a higher level of care. They suggested that a ritual, about to knock over my water here, would enable the heroes to share her terror and help her overcome them, but the more anima would be required to power the ritual. Erelon proposed they take the fight to the Blighted and steal back the anima they now hoarded from the Night Fae. Their fight took them back to Erelon's dead grove, Tirna Nok, which now played host to terrors invading Ardenweald. Its formerly dormant heart of the grove was now again full of anima stolen from across the realm. With their allies fending off the Droost, the champions stole back the heart, but the enemy quickly summoned reinforcements. With help from Lady Moonberry, the champions were able to escape the heart, but in the process alerted all the Droost to their location. While the Night Fae helped prepare the ritual for the unique Wild Seed, a fierce battle erupted throughout Ardenweald as the Droost sought to regain the lost anima. With the ritual beginning, the champions beheld the true shape of the Dreamer's nightmares, recognizing the soul that resided within the Wild Seed. The Dreamer was Ysera, aspect of the Green Dragonflight. After being corrupted by Xavius, the champions had been forced to slay her at the Temple of Elune in Val Shara, amid the Burning Legion's third invasion of Azeroth. Her corruption and death haunted her still, but the heroes successfully soothed her. Still, Ysera's dream drew more Droost to her location in the Hibernal Hollow. The fighting was vicious, led by former Fae Lorcron the Hunter, now at the head of the enemy. The Blighted Droost, which is for no frickin' reason. Listen, nothing happens for a reason, okay? That's just how that works. Nothing happens for a reason. Just go with it. Just go with it. Though the champion successfully fended off these forces, Ysera's Wild Seed was mortally wounded in the fighting. The only chance to save her was to appeal directly to the Eternal One who ruled this realm, the Winter Queen herself. Those whom the champions had aided in their travels rallied to support them, and Ysera's Wild Seed was brought before the ruler. The Winter Queen had sacrificed many souls amid the drought, but earnest pleas from Lady Moonberry and Arelon persuaded her. The cost was steep. In order to heal Ysera, this queen sacrificed some of her own being. As Ysera burst forth from her wild sea and reborn, she was now bound to the realm of death. She had been saved from oblivion, and for this she was grateful. With this matter laid to rest, the Winter Queen listened to her champion's warnings and took them to the largest and oldest of the dream trees. This was the heart of the forest, from where she oversaw the Ardenweald. Due to the anima drought, this great tree was beginning to wither, and the queen had glimpsed a future in which it fell. Her voice was grave as she informed the champions that the tree's power was vital in keeping the jailer imprisoned in the maw. But the heart of the forest desperately needed anima if it was to survive. The Winter Queen asked the heroes to hasten to losing connection. Oh, we're back. Hastened. Oh god, I lost place. The heroes hastened to the realm of Revendreth to speak to its ruler, Sire Denathrius, the Eternal One who ruled it. His realm had grown masterful at extracting anima, and the queen was certain he would be willing to help them if he knew of their need. While the Maw existed for the souls the Arbiter judged beyond redemption, Revendreth was a place where violent, wicked, and especially prideful souls were granted a second chance. The denizens of Revendreth, the Venthyr, punished and often tortured these arrogant souls to make them understand and feel remorse for the cruelties that they had performed in life. Let's take this way a little bit. These acts were inscribed on a sin stole, which the soul carried with them. Those who could be made to see the error of their ways were given a choice. They could become Venthyr themselves, or they could return to the Arbiter for a second judgment. While punishment could be brutal, it was the only way these souls could avoid the eternal torment of the Maw. Jesus Christ, it's so red here. My God. I get it, you're vampires. Yeah, because blood, get it? Okay, there you go. Cool. Let's get a little closer, get rid of some of that fog. There we go. That's a nice shot. Upon arriving in Revendreth, the champions were met by Venthyr Lord Chamberlain. Sire Denathrius had already heard of their coming and was eager to meet with the mortals who had traversed the realms of death. Who had traversed the realms of death. On his way to the stronghold of Castle Nathria, however, their carriage was set upon by a group of rebels who tossed the heroes into a swamp filled with anima-starved devourers. Finding their way back to the road, they continued to Darkhaven, the final stop before the safety of Denathrius' fortifications. Here the champions found the citizens of Darkhaven crushed between the dire forces of the drought, the high anima taxes Sire Denathrius had levied on the populace, and the rebellion against the sire himself. Yeah, in the middle of a drought, he has a freaking anima tax, by the way. As if you needed to know who the bad guy is here immediately. In fending off the rebels... Hang on. Champions learned that many believed Denathrius bore responsibility for the anima drought and all that had stemmed from it. Reaching Castle Nathria, the heroes at last met with the ruler of the realm. Denathrius was a gracious host, but unwilling to help Ardenweald. Revendreth faced its own slew of problems, but if the champions could at least put down the rebellion, the sire would pledge his realm's anima to their cause. He offered the heroes the support of Lord Chamberlain, who would help them navigate the intricate politics of the realm and dispatch forces as needed. He also introduced the champions to his court of harvesters. The court represented Denathrius' most loyal and trusted Venthyr, but of the 7, only 4 presently stood before him. Each of these harvesters ruled over a different ward in Revendreth, and each had been given a unique medallion that contained a portion of Sire Denathrius' power. Lord Chamberlain and the heroes would be dispatched to first capture the Accuser, formerly the Harvester of Pride and leader of the Ceremony Ward, who was now a leader of the rebellion. At the Accuser's seat in the Halls of Atonement, Lord Chamberlain and the heroes made their way to the heavily defended Sinstone. After dispatching the Inquisitors who guarded it, Chamberlain performed a ritual that would greatly weaken her, allowing him to ascend to her position. However, this ritual did not work initially, as the Accuser was proud of the sins she had overcome. In desperation, Lord Chamberlain wielded Denathrius' medal of domination against her, which summoned an echo of her daughter whom she had murdered. Weakened, the heroes easily overcame her and returned to Sire Denathrius, who stripped her of her position. The sire rewarded the champions with an invitation from another member of the Court of Harvesters, the Fearstalker, Harvester of Dread, to inspire fear in the Accuser with a penitent hunt. But amid the torturous hunt, the Accuser separated the heroes from the Fearstalker, promising to show them proof Denathrius was the true enemy of Revendreth. Through a magical doorway the Accuser constructed, the champions could see Denathrius was hoarding anima, vast stores heavily guarded within Castle Nathria. Sensing the presence of another, Denathrius ordered the harvester who accompanied him, Lady Inerva Darkvein, to deal with the interlopers. With the truth revealed, the heroes and the Accuser were set upon by Lady Inerva and her guards. Fending off endless waves of attackers, the Accusers managed to conjure an exit. They were free of Lady Inerva, but not of the Fearstalker or her minions. Slaying her, the champions and the Accuser were able to retrieve the Fearstalker's Medallion of Dread, a powerful artifact that would help them navigate Revendreth and support the rebellion. Escaping from the court's clutches, the Accuser set the missions on heroes to find, liberate, and bring back Prince Renathal, once the rebellion's leader. Renathal was the first Venthyr Denathrius had created, the closest thing he had to a son. When Renathal had grown suspicious of Denathrius' schemes involving anima, the sire had banished him to an unknown fate. Although the Accuser did not know what had become of the prince, Renathal's ally, Theotar, had more information and had been sentenced to the Ember Ward. After freeing the mad Theotar, the heroes discovered that Renathal had been dragged off to Sinfall. Like much of the Ember Ward, the Tower of Sinfall was filled with light, which had lingered after an ancient battle. Eons ago, an affront to the light had been committed here, forcing the Naro to respond. The light had blighted the Ember Ward, making it largely uninhabitable to the Venthyr, who would be burned under its gaze. Because they're vampires, do you get it? Unfortunately, the champion had no such limitations. Disabling a prism at the top of the tower, which aimed and magnified the light in Sinfall, the champions discovered Vorpalia, sentient blade of the prince. The blade disclosed that Renthal had been sent to the Maw. With Vorpalia's help, the heroes ventured once more to the jailer's realm and freed the prince. However, while the prince was grateful for the rescue, he could not leave without recovering his allies from Torghast. A controversial place indeed. This was the jailer's seat of power, and also a prison for those he considered most dangerous to him. Endlessly shifting, it reeked of the jailer's domination magics. To venture there would be to risk almost certain capture and unspeakable torment. Nevertheless, Renathal was not his father, and he would not abandon his friends. Against all odds, their rescue was successful. The heroes of Azeroth returned to Revendreth, not only with Prince Renathal, but with the Curator and his allies as well. Through the I enjoyed Torghast a lot for what it was, but as an optional thing, as like a mini-game, side fun thing. And that's pretty much my biggest problem with Torghast in a nutshell. It is also a lot more fun if you're doing it in a group. Anyways. With all the pieces in place, Prince Renathal directed his followers to use Sinfall's light and mirrors to clear the path to Castle Nathria. Renathal himself lay wait in the Court of Harvesters where he awakened his rebels. Denathrius had drained these Venthyr of Anima amidst the prince's first attempt at rebellion. They had been turned to stone, but with Anima these allies were reawakened. Sorry, this whole thing. On the far side of the Dominance Gate, the rebels defeated General Khal and disabled the Sire's anima diverters, empowering their allies. Each step was hard-won, but the return of Renathal and the revelations of Denathrius' treachery had inspired more citizens of Revendreth to join the rebellion and fight. The wave of rebels ultimately crested an area where large quantities of anima had been stored. Denathrius and allies fueled themselves here, greatly increasing their power, but when Renathal spied Denathrius standing alone, he charged ahead to challenge the Sire himself. Empowered as he was by anima, the prince might as well have stood a chance, save for Denathrius' sword, Ramonia? The blade was devoted to Denathrius and attacked Renathal on its own as he charged, slicing the prince mercilessly until all the anima that propelled him was gone. The prince collapsed at his father's feet. Sire Denathrius forced his son to watch as his forces released every drop of anima that he had been harvesting those long years of drought. A nigh inconceivable flood poured forth beneath their feet, and Denathrius took great pleasure in informing Renathal that it was all flowing directly into the maw, so the jailer could be freed and death would dominate all who opposed them. The sire spared Renathal, enjoying the lesson he had imparted to his son. He and Ramonia disappeared, leaving the devastated, disillusioned rebels behind. The stakes had changed. More than Revendreth was at stake now. With two Eternals plotting together, the entirety of the Shadowlands had been even more endangered. Question. Why is Denathrius working for the jailer? Oh, right. Because every faction, every zone, has at least one eternally loyal minion, and in this case, it's a guy who's arguably his equal, which makes even less sense than usual. Like, seriously, I was actually thinking about this when I was going through Shadowlands the second time. It's so bonkers how much of the jailer's plans hinge on Denathrius, who is actually behind the entire MSQ up to this point. Not the jailer, Denathrius. Like, he's the bad guy. The drought, which has affected everything in every area we've interacted with so far. If you've been paying attention, right, that's the main plot thread. Drought, drought, drought. And then we get here and we find out about the taxes and the hoarding and, oh, it was him. It's all Denathrius. He was doing it all for the jailer. Why? Moving on. After the rebellion failed to stop Sire Denathrius, the champions returned to Oribos. Do we have to? There, Talinara urged the heroes accompanying them to an audience of the leaders of each of the major afterlife. What? Oh, okay. Though the rulers could not leave their realms, they projected themselves to the Eternal City to speak together. Here the Archon learned the fate of Primus, and Prince Renathal explained to the Archon and the Winter Queen directly of his sire's treachery and all that had transpired in Revendreth. The Eternal Ones were shocked by these revelations, but turned immediately to the preparation for war to come. They would all agree. The mortals who visited their realms had proven instrumental in both in covering the jailer's plots and their... What? And supporting their denizens through turmoil. The champions of Azeroth, and any mortal allies that could rouse from their homeworld, were directed to join in a covenant from one of the four realms, the Kyrian of Bastion, the Necrolords of Maldraxxus, the Night Fae of Ardenweald, or the Venthyr of Revendreth. In forming a bond with these realms, they could further empower not only themselves, but also each afterlife, which would grow stronger by adding mortals to their ranks. Regardless of their choice, all who joined a covenant were directed to first empower each realm with the souls denied them, all of which had been condemned to the maw. In the hellscape, the champions would rescue these souls and restore them to their proper place, in turn redirecting some small but welcome portion of anima to the starving afterlives. I kept playing until I finished the Covenant campaign, which is functionally right after it. And it looks like isn't even getting a covering in this? Nope. Well, maybe? Hang on. It kinda is? It kind of isn't. I don't know. That was a weird one. Yeah, no, I think actually we're not covering the Covenant campaigns here. Which makes sense because we didn't cover the artifact campaigns or the order halls either at all. So I shouldn't say that. We very, 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 very briefly glancedly mentioned them in a couple of sentences a few times. Some of them. So yeah, it makes sense that we're just completely skipping over the MSQ of the Covenant Orders, or the Covenant Order Halls, or whatever you want to call that. Where am I? What am I doing? This way, I think. Yep, there it is. Hi, Ross. Though the champions of Azeroth had done much to secure Ardenweald, threats against the Night Fae remained. The bulk of the Blighted Droost had retreated, but their leader remained committed to overtaking the holdings of the Winter Queen. The champions assisted Erelon in investigating several overrun groves, as well as a fallen hunting party that had been ambushed. While chasing down various leads and rescuing survivors from affected groves, however, Erelon himself went missing. Bolstered by Ysera's rebirth and the new mortal recruits flocking to the Night Fae Covenant... Okay, I'm sorry. This is apparently the Ardenweald campaign. These 3 paragraphs. I'm not sure if that's better. Together, the Night Fae fought their way through wave after tactics until they reached the leader of the Blighted Droost, Gorak Zar. The Droost's leader fought the Night Fae fiercely, even taunting them, though they ultimately struck the killing blow. But in their moment of triumph, Lady Moonberry sensed something was amiss, an illusion that had been hiding the true face of their target. It had slain not the Blighted Droost, but their missing friend, Erelon. Gorak Zor had wrapped him in an illusion of herself, and now it was too late to save him. To make matters worse, while the Wild Hunt and its allies were away, the Blighted Droost had launched a full-scale invasion of the Grove of Awakening. Returning quickly to the grove, the Winter Queen joined the fray, calling Ardenweald to the hunt. When the battle was cleared, Gorak Zar and her Blighted Droost were forever culled from the groves, and the Winter Queen were safe. Okay, cool. So there's the Ardenweald campaign. The champions choosing the Covenant of the Kyrian returned to the Bastion, where they took a soulbind and assisted their friend Clea with her ascension. Now that enough of Bastion's anima stores had been refilled, Bastion could at last ascend their top aspirants. The final task before Clea involved bearing her first soul from the mortal realms of the Shadowlands. The Forsworn attacked the rites. Why is there no music? Why is there no music? Oh, whatever. I don't even care at this point. I don't. I don't even care. I don't care. Whatever, fine. Oh, now there's music. Okay, sure, whatever. Here they learned that the soul Clea was to bear back on Azeroth. In Lakeshire, after witnessing the soul's final day, the soul was ready to move on. Clea bore the soul to the Arbiter, but to her horror she watched as the soul bypassed the Arbiter, heading towards the Maw. Here the bitter truth was apparent to Clea. Bastion was not alone in its torment amidst the anima drought. There was little time for explanation. As Clea had completed her first soul-bearing, she was ready to ascend. Clea's new wings had scarce unfurled before Bastion came under attack by Devos, the Hand of Doubt. It was she who created the Forsworn, recruiting soldiers amongst the failed aspirants, beginning with Uther. Pelagos tended to Clea while the champions took up arms to defend the spires of Ascension. In doing so, they were forced to battle Uther, though the Forsworn was seemingly more interested in swaying the champions to his side. The Archon had lied, he said, had stolen his justice. Devos was leading them to a better future. Dun, dun, dun. Recognizing Devos as the true target, the champions slayed the Dark Kyrian. With her defeat, leadership of the Forsworn passed to Lysonia, who fled with Uther. The immediate threat was over, but the Forsworn had shattered the crown of Ascension. Here is any others. Without it, the Kyrian could not create more Ascended. Mykonikos, the Forged Light Prime, could prepare the crest, but he required the Hammer of Festus. Get it? Genesis of Eons. After retrieving the stolen hammer from the Forsworn, the crest was repaired, but weakened from its shattering. The task remained to empower it. With Pelagos, the champions traveled to Maldraxxus, which is not where we are right now. Sure, we'll just accept that. Whatever. They lent their strength to the Necrolord's assault in the House of Constructs. The heart of its leader, Margrave Garmal, aided in restoring the crest. The next journey to Revendreth, where they further empowered the crest with the Seal of Contrition. Their final step was the realm of the Winter Queen to obtain the last item, a vessel of Ardenweald. The Crest of Ascension had originally been crafted with the assistance from Ardenweald, but the vessels required to repair the crest came at dear cost. Fortunately, a fairy named Willow Blossom volunteered to aid them. Pelagos and the champions gathered what was needed for the ritual, but when the time came, Willow Blossom revealed she was the vessel. With the ritual's completion, she would become part of the crest. She was happy and honored to be part to do so for a great cause, but Pelagos was pained by the news. Both he and the champions vowed that Willow Blossom's sacrifice would be remembered for eternity, and she would play a part in the journey of every soul that reached the Shadowlands. With the Crest of Ascension repaired and empowered, the heroes returned to Bastion to find reports of Lysonia and Uther heading for the Temple of Humility. There, the Paragon of Humility had already engaged Lysonia and Uther in combat. The two Forsworn fled to the Maw before the Paragon could be killed, but the heroes gave chase. In the Maw, both the champions and Clea tracked down Lysonia, who, at Helia's command, was set to sacrifice Uther to empower herself. The pair had fought and defeated her, but she escaped. The weakened Uther was devastated and ashamed that he had let loyalty blind him. Loyalty to what? Doubt? Sorry. He asked that the champions not leave him behind, so they took him to Oribos, where the long road of healing and penance lay ahead of him. Sure, whatever. Returning to the Bastion, Archon had gathered all her forces to root out the Forsworn from its ranks. At the Citadel of Loyalty, the Kyrian drove off Lysonia's forces, but the new Hand of Doubt led a surprise assault against the Archon herself. As the battle swelled within Bastion, Uther arrived, helping the champions slay Lysonia and quell the Forsworn's threat. With this act, Uther surrendered himself to the Archon's mercy. He now understood that justice was not for him to decide, and his quest to bring Arthas to justice had at some point turned to vengeance, probably 3 seconds after he started it. The Archon had much to think on, as so many had been misled by Devos, but for now, both watched the Crest of Ascension to be empowered by the remaining temple. Once Devos' temple, the Temple of Loyalty. Peace had been restored to Bastion, the future of its descendants served. Sorry, double-checking something. In Revendreth, though Renathal may have suffered defeat, he remained committed to an assault on Castle Nathria, the stronghold of Sire Denathrius. Working from the leeching vaults up, Renathal led the champions of Azeroth and his rebels into battle. Denathrius' coffers remained full of anima, despite what he'd already granted the Maw, and his allies remained justly galvanized. Fighting through the Harvesters, Huntsman, Altamore, and Lady Enerva Darkvein, the champions arrived to find the members of Denathrius' court reveling in the reliquary of opulence. There they were forced to subdue Denathrius' Council of Blood, as well as the sin-burdened soul of the Sun King, Kael'thas Sunstrider, who had been tortured not to redeem his sins, but to amplify them. But beyond his twisted loyalty, Revendreth's deadly Stone Legion generals were bent on trapping and destroying the rebels before they could close in on their master. But after they too fell before the might of the champions and their allies, only the sire and his closest pets remained in his lonely castle. Dispatching Denathrius' loyalists, Renathal turned to the sire himself, but Denathrius would not be so easily killed. As the sire weakened, his living blade, Ramonia, pulled his essence into herself and attempted to escape with it. Fortunately, she was captured before she could do so, and Renathal knew how to keep him imprisoned. The champions of Azeroth had previously helped free and imprisoned Naru, Zerali, from the sanguine depths. In the Towers of Dawnkeep, her light would prevent Denathrius' sword and his essence from ever leaving the tower. Wow, that's just running over that raid, isn't it? Prince Renathal was delighted to see the champions of Azeroth flood the ranks of his Venthyr Covenant. Since the fall of Castle Nathria, the Court of Harvesters had been mistrustful and slow to action, but their medallions still held great strength that Denathrius had imparted to them, and they would need it for the battles to come. Those pledged to the Venthyr Covenant would lose their place from where they were reading, eagerly plied themselves to this task. Is this seriously, like... Okay, cool. Where are we? Sure. Let's do something up close for once. Of course, nothing interesting is nearby. We'll go with that. That sounds cool. That looks cool. These powerful medallions could be forged into the crown of Harvesters, but there was one problem. Even imprisoned, Denathrius could still inflict his will on the crown, warping its power to his own ends. The only way to both forge the crown and break the hold Denathrius had upon it would be to visit the Citadel of Loyalty in Bastion, where Mechanicos, the steward and forge light of Prime of Bastion, could both craft and purify the crown. It was hardly a place that would normally have hosted Venthyr, but given the extraordinary situation and Bastion's familiarity with the champions of Azeroth, the crown was able to be forged and purged at the Citadel. Denathrius would have no more power over it. Some of these are interesting, and some of these are not. When those mortals pledged to the Necrolord, which I don't like moving again. I just got here. Could you stop bouncing the story around these zones, please? Ah, dang it. Back up here. Up here, up here. When those mortals pledged to the Necrolord Covenant returned from recovering souls in the Maw, they found the seat of the Primus under attack by the House of Constructs and the House of Rituals. Seeing a desperate need to empower their forces to quash the threat, Draka asked they help the Baroness Vosh rally those who remained in the House of Eyes. Together they stole the necropolis Zereth, greatly augmenting the Chosen's forces. Instrumental to the continued success of the Necrolords was their recently returned Baron, Alexandros Morgreen. The House of Construct's attack on Bastion troubled him deeply, and he wanted to aid the Kyrian. After meeting Xandria, the Paragon of Courage, and rooting out Margrave Garmel's forces from her temple, however, a more personal matter began gnawing at Alexandros. As a brave paladin, he grappled with why he'd been sent to Maldraxxus and not Bastion, questioning if it was his lack of faith in the light. Xandria assured him the Arbiter had sent him to the place where he could best serve death. Despite her reassurance, Alexandros continued to struggle with these thoughts until the Kyrian offered him the wealth of Bastion's knowledge to find the answers he sought. As Alexandros read, he realized his memories of his life were the source of his courage, and the path to ascend in Bastion would have made him relinquish this strength. With his newfound insight, Alexandros resolved to be ready and take the fight to the House of Constructs. With fresh allies in the Kyrian, the two afterlives worked together to bring down the House of Constructs. In raiding the Margrave stronghold, the group discovered a store of anima from Revendreth that had been given to the Margrave, as well as a mantle that had been stolen from the statue of the Primus, which was returned to its proper place and used to further strengthen the Necrolords. Tracing the anima stores back to Revendreth, the Necrolord Covenant met with Kael'thas Sunstrider, who was on his own journey to reduce the massive weight of his Sinstone. Together they severed ties between Denathrius loyalist and the Maw-aligned Maldraxxus. Doing so yielded terrifying information. Kel'Thuzad of the House of Rituals was yet another Maldraxxus soul in league with the Jailer. Didn't we already know that? That's whatever. With help, the heroes disguised themselves and infiltrated Kel'Thuzad's inner circle. There they discovered the extent of the Lich's plans, to bring the full might of the Maw into Maldraxxus. The heroes soon found out and fled, but not before seeing that Kel'Thuzad had long ago captured Margrave Sindain. With Sindain subdued, Kel'Thuzad had been siphoning his power and orchestrating the House of Rituals and Construct's alignment with the Jailer, for no explained reason. With these tidings, the time was ripe to end the House of Rituals, consolidating their allies both within and without Maldraxxus. They confronted Kel'Thuzad, saved Margrave Sindain, bringing the House of Rituals back into allied Maldraxxus. And we're already done with our... I didn't even reach it before we finished talking about this. Goddamn. Amid the start of their journey into the Covenants, while reclaiming various souls from the Maw, hurt my hand. The champions had learned the location of Bane Bloodhoof. With help from Venari, the broker who had previously helped the heroes find Alexandros Morgreen, they had managed to rescue and return the High Chieftain to Oribos. In slaying Bane's warden, however, they had also found a curious key on his corpse. Returning to the searching the antechamber of Torghast, the champions had located the door that matched the warden's strange key. Inside was another prisoner of the Jailer, wearing a helm and chained with the same enchanted shackles that held Bane. The figure was large, towering over the champions, even as he was forced into a kneeling position. Withered and, as Bane had been, disoriented. He had lost most of his memories, but he did remember that he had been imprisoned to serve the Jailer. He believed that if the heroes could find his stolen memories, he might be able to help them, but he would need one arm free to do so. The champions located and restored one of the prisoner's memories, and even found a way to break one of the shackles on his arms. It would take some time, but the prisoner, whom the heroes came known as the Rune Carver, could even use magic to strengthen their weapons and armor. Long after this, with the various covenants empowered and conflicts with the realm settled, Bolvar summoned the champions of Azeroth back to Oribos, asking them to return to the Maw and find the Horde and Alliance leaders who were still missing. In the depth of the Jailer's realms, they sought out its brokers, hoping to bargain for useful information. Their efforts yielded a piece of ice-crusted debris, which Bolvar reattuned to find Jaina. At first, the Lord Admiral did not believe the heroes to be any more than a trap or illusion conjured by the jailer, but eventually believed them enough to risk their escape and accompanying them back to Oribos. Well, that's interesting. We'll go here. All were overjoyed to see yet another leader returned, but Volvar was deeply alarmed at the news regarding Anduin. Thrallbane and Jaina all implored the High Lord to once again use the Helm of Domination to search within the Maw. Despite the danger, Bolvar agreed. He could not forsake the king. Here the Azeroth forces observed a conversation between Sylvanas and Anduin, who was no longer chained but was confined by a magical barrier. She seemed sincere in her desire to convert Anduin to her cause, promising the jailer would remake the machine of death and the afterlives into a more just system. She believed neither life nor death were fair, but under the jailer it would become so. Anduin remained steadfast in his rejection of her ideas. Sylvanas departed, but not without reminding him that he had a choice to make: join her and the jailer willingly, or be made to serve. As it did not appear Anduin was in immediate danger, the High Lord and the champions decided to turn their attention to other more urgent matters for the time being. But the champions were summoned back to Oribos not long after they departed. Bolvar was in agony, suffering from his dark visions. Peering once more into the maw, they saw the new Mornblade, the Sword of Domination, being smithed while Sylvanas and the jailer looked on. The blade looked much like Anduin's sword, Charlemagne, but was marked with runes. The jailer told Sylvanas it was time to forge a new weapon. Though the blade was clearly set before them, it became clear it was not the blade they were discussing. Now the vision changed. So many visions. Sylvanas arrived at Anduin's prison. The two had spoken many times since Bolvar had last observed them. When presented again with an ultimatum, Anduin suddenly understood why Aunt Sylvanas kept emphasizing that he chose, because she herself had never had the choice of whether to accept domination. Arthas had cruelly thrust the fate of undeath upon her. Anduin saw some shreds of Sylvanas' morality left, saw the uncertainty in her, and gave her the choice back: would she choose to be the Ranger General or the Banshee Queen? At this moment, the jailer discovered Bolvar spying in his realm. Chains shot out from the Helm of Domination, and Bolvar battled the jailer for control over his own mind. The heroes and the others anchored Bolvar with their words, and the connection was broken. Hi, Spartan. Though those allied with the jailer could not know it, the fallen Eternal One had already moved to the next phase of his plans. Securing the 5 magic sigils he needed to open the sepulchre of the first ones. Sire Denathrius had given up his sigil willingly when he had joined the jailer's cause. Why? Not answered. None in Maldraxxus knew what became of the Primus' sigil. The other 3 sigils of the Arbiter, the Winter Queen, and the Archon remained in their allies' custody. Anduin proved to be just the weapon the jailer needed to infiltrate the heart of Bastion. The young king had impressed him at the Waystone with his selflessness and unshakable faith in and command of the light. His inherent compassion and great heart would shine enough to conceal the jailer's domination of his mind. Newly broken, Anduin arrived in Bastion, easily passing all Kyrian security measures. Hearing an admiring evaluation from Clea, the Archon agreed to grant the king an audience. Anduin approached, but the Archon quickly saw through the ruse and ordered her brother to release him. As her guards began to rush forward to the young king, Anduin hefted and the reforged Charlemagne, now a blade of domination magic bearing the name Kingsmorn. Black energy roiled upwards and chains shot forth, snaking around the guards and rending them inert. The dominated Anduin leapt upward, and the glamour that concealed him dissolved, revealing the moss-worn armor that marked Anduin as the jailer's vessel. He plunged Kingsmorn deep into the Archon's chest, and its magic drew forth her sigil. For the briefest moment, Anduin's horror at what he had just done overwhelmed the jailer's domination magic, but he quickly fell back under its sway, vanishing before he could be challenged or captured. Once Bolvar and the champions of Azeroth received these tidings, they decided to travel to Ardenweald in hope of preventing the theft of another sigil. Now sufficiently recovered from her time in the Maw, Jaina joined them. They found Ardenweald already under a moss-worn attack led by Sylvanas. In an effort to confuse the enemy, many Night Fae magically disguised themselves as Winter Queen, while the Queen herself protected the heart of the forest. Forces from Maldraxxus, Revendreth, and Bastion worked side by side in defense of the wood. One moment. Sylvanas soon became aware of the decoys and turned her attention to the great tree. She opened a portal to the maw, and a charred behemoth lumbered forth, then toppled to the ground, dead. Standing atop it was Tyrande Whisperwind, the Night Warrior, ready to avenge her home and people. Sylvanas and Tyrande were evenly matched. Both skilled and powerful fighters, both Mary Sues from separate riders, and magically augmented in their abilities. As the two fought, Tyrande told her enemy she had dispatched the Banshee Queen's champion, Nathanos Blightcaller, prior to entering the Shadowlands. Tyrande had barely exerted herself in taking her champion's head. Sylvanas was caught off guard by this knowledge, surprised she had not found him in the realms of death. Tyrande was quick to spot the lapse in her and preened at learning the jailer had not informed Sylvanas that her champion had fallen. The fight ended abruptly at the sound of the Wild Hunt's horn, however, as the enemy had broken their line elsewhere. Sylvanas' actions had been a delaying tactic. She shifted to her Banshee form, taking to the air, but Tyrande refused to let her escape. She allowed the full power of the Night Warrior to flow through her, even knowing it would kill her. The two collided in mid-air and crashed to the ground. For a moment it seemed like the Night Warrior had won, but then Tyrande's powers began to ebb. As Sylvanas started to overpower the High Priestess, Ysera joined the fray. Sylvanas escaped and Tyrande collapsed. The power of the Night Warrior had consumed her body and soul. Fortunately, Ysera sent the High Priestess gently to sleep before the rage of the Avatar could take her. Across the forest, the champion at last hastened to the heart of the forest alongside Jaina and Bolvar. They arrived just in time to see Anduin use King's Morn once again to steal the Winter Queen's sigil. Sorry, I'm looking at where we're going next. Okay. The In-Between hid much more than a broker city. It also hid a place vital to the jailer's plan. Curthia, the City of Secrets, a realm that safeguarded powerful knowledge and artifacts which the brokers believed originated with the mythical First Ones. The Primus had known of this place, and suspecting he would be captured, concealed his sigil within this realm prior to his confrontation with the jailer. He believed Curthia to be sufficiently protected and hidden such that it was safe even from the jailer's grasp, even if the jailer captured the Primus himself. Furious at being unable to attain the Primus' sigil, the jailer took everything else he could from his fellow Eternal, including his memories. Using the very power of domination the Primus had created, the jailer forced the ruler of Maldraxxus into his service as the Rune Carver. Lorshok. Since that time, the Rune Carver had done much for the jailer. He designed Frostmourne and the Helm of Domination for the Lich King, among the many other weapons the Mossworn carried. Over the eons without number, accumulating souls and funneling anima into the maw, the jailer's power had become sufficient to locate Curthia. Wielding his chains of domination, he was able to pull it from the In-Between into the Shadowlands. Curthia's sudden appearance sent ripples across the maw, urging the Covenant and allied realms of death into action. Tal Inara, sent the champion to the City of Secrets, and I'm going the wrong way. Into happy face here. Hello. Where they activated a waystone that opened a massive portal for the armies of death to flow directly into the maw. At last, the Covenant made their way from Curthia into the maw to attack the jailer's forces. One moment, please. Let's go over here. You know what's funny? I've been thinking about this, Spartan. I'll talk about this more during the review, but I think at least part of the problem is they introduced all new stuff with no real connection to any old stuff. And I know that sounds like a weird way to explain that, but that would work better for a reset, not a finale, right? Let me explain that differently. If you were doing Mass Effect 1, and you have all new races and all new peoples and all new characters, cool. If you're doing Mass Effect 3, the end of a trilogy, and you have all new races and all new people and all new cultures, it just detaches you a little bit more than it otherwise would, you know what I mean? And that is how they were presenting Shadowlands, was as a big finale. They were failing at it, but they were. Avoiding the main battle, the champion skirted the Mossworn to locate the vaults of Curthia, where the jailer's forces had amassed. There, in the Vault of Secrets, the Primus had hidden his sigil. With Bolvar's help, they managed to recover the Primus's sigil before the Forsworn did. Though it was encased in strange magic that resembled the rune carver's work. At this, Bolvar suggested the champion bear it to Torghast while the jailer's forces were distracted, in the hopes that the rune carver could dispel the enchantment. But as the heroes presented the sigil to the rune carver, his remaining memories and original form returned to him, revealing the Primus reborn. The jailer, now sensing the sigil nearby, sped back to Torghast to claim it with Anduin, his greatest champion. The Primus hurriedly infused the heroes of Azeroth with anima to fight the Forsworn that converged on them, while he himself struggled to overcome the jailer. In the end, however, Anduin was able to retrieve the sigil for his master, tilting the battle in the Maw's favor. The Primus and the champion retreated at great cost. The jailer had obtained yet another sigil to unlock the sepulchre. All he needed now was the one carried by the Arbiter. You're right, Maskerman. I think you're absolutely right. It was a defeat, but the Primus had not lost hope. The Primus was a master smith and could forge new sigils once the Covenants could realign with their purposes. For the moment, though, every step had to be taken to prevent the jailer from obtaining the final sigil, his own, presently deep within the battle, the heart of the non-functioning Arbiter. Two of the jailer's allies, Baron Vizaz of the House of the Chosen and the Titan-forged sorceress Helia, still occupied their fortress of Desmoteron. As the armies of the Maw and those of the Pantheon of Death continued to battle, the Primus suggested felling the two enemies once and for all. Baroness Draka was the head of the assault, and Thrall agreed to accompany her and Azeroth's champions. She agreed, saying she had heard of Thrall's great deeds. Alexandros Moigraine joined them, as well as troops from other realms, led by Prince Renethal and the newly ascended Clea, Lord Hearn of the Wild Hunt. As they rushed forward into the battlefield, Thrall spoke with the spirit of his mother. It was difficult for Thrall not to reveal his identity, but he refrained. Since coming to the Shadowlands, he had learned that some souls did not retain their memories of life, so he excised the same restraint he had on alternate Draenor, not wishing to cause unnecessary distraction from the battle at hand. Draka had no such qualms, addressing Thrall by his birth name Goel and revealing that she had known who he was from the moment she'd seen him. Thrall had his father's eyes, you see. Together they tracked down Vyraz and Helia. Though these two powerful beings were almost undefeatable, the Primus himself was backing their forces. While the champion of Azeroth and their allies felled the traitorous Baron, Primus banished Helia from the Maw. She could help the jailer no longer. As reward for Draka's heroic efforts, the Primus officially appointed her Margrave of the House of Chosen. Despite its importance to the Shadowlands, Oribos was a small realm and poorly defended. Once the Forsworn attacked, the defenders of the Pantheon of Death would have little chance to protect the Arbiter or her sigil. In a desperate bid to blunt the jailer's forces before he could evade the internal city, Bolvar directed another assault in the Maw to conquer the jailer in the heart of Torghast. The champion, Thrall, and Jaina accompanied him, fighting through the jailer's twisted weapons of torture, even the corrupted Eye of Odin, which the champion had earlier blinded. Above the summit, they encountered those who remained of the Nine, the Valkyr who had helped Sylvanas forge her pact with the jailer. Eliminating them was necessary and would remove any chance Sylvanas might have of escaping the champions. Yeah, no, it was all just like, and then this, right? Yeah, no, and Zoval is just such a nothing burger, too. He is so terrible. Sorry, getting off topic. Let's finish this up. They encountered other prisoners here, including the soul of Garrosh Hellscream. His arrogance had for years been a plentiful, steady source of anima to fuel the jailer's armies. But at last he was able to break free of his chains and charge his torturer, destroying them both in a burst of anima that left only ashes behind. And that's the end of Garrosh. Hope you liked that. Continuing to the tower's peak, the armies came to the end of the Soul River, where endless power could be siphoned. There the champions met with it and dispatched Kel'Thuzad, who's just dead now, I guess. Major character, just killing people all over the place here. As well as a corrupted Fate Scribe and a malfunctioning automaton, the guardian of the First Ones. The champions also dispatched a twisted remnant of Ner'zhul, who had suffered the cruelest torment at the jailer's direction for failing him on Azeroth. When they reached the apex of the tower, Sylvanas Windrunner herself was waiting for them. Though the deaths of her 9 had assured the heroes that Sylvanas could meet her end, this development hardly dampened her power, and she unleashed the full force of her might upon them. Even this was but a ruse, however, a tactic to waylay the allied armies of death, while the jailer made his move on Oribos. As the champion put Sylvanas on the defensive, she took to her banshee form and followed the jailer as he ascended to the Eternal City. The jailer appeared then, summoned an enormous set of chains to lock the tower of Torghast to Oribos. As the jailer departed in pursuit of his true prize, Jaina quickly created a portal for the champions to continue their fight at the very feet of the Arbiter. Although the exhausted group fought valiantly, in the end, as they feared, the jailer overcame the Arbiter's meager defenses and reached out for Evo's hand. My god, Evo, I never knew. His old sigil had floated forward as the form of the Arbiter vanished, and his stolen sigil settled into his chest as it once had long ago. The jailer used the power of the 5 sigils to open a portal directly to Zereth Mortis, where lay the sepulchre of the first ones. Sylvanas' satisfaction, however, turned to shock and anger. Recovering the final key had revealed the jailer's true nature, as he forced the hapless leaders of Azeroth to kneel before him. He wrapped them in chains and told them to prepare for a new world, one in which he would be the ruler of all creation, one in which all would serve him. I mean, have you not been paying attention to this? Is such it should be a good cutscene, the one that we're referencing here, and it really isn't. It might actually be one of those situations where we give a plus and a negative, or a plus and 3 negatives, because it's just Sylvanas had heard this before from one of the jailer's pawns. These were not the words of one who wished to remake the cosmos to ensure justice and free will. They were the words of a tyrant, the words of her tormentor. Sylvanas sickly realized Anduin had been right. She had been nothing more to the jailer than another tool to obtain his ends. There was one thing, though, the jailer had never taken from Sylvanas. She would never serve. And so, though the hour was far too late, she fired an arrow at the Eternal One. A futile gesture of defiance, and the jailer no longer cared if the Banshee Queen turned on him. She had served her purpose, and soon she would be gone, along with the rest of creation. But she had helped him, and he repaid her kindness with a gift, the piece of her soul that Frostborn had taken from her. Sylvanas had been unaware of it, but she had spent the last few decades missing a piece of herself, the piece the jailer had kept hidden. Only in what the jailer assumed were her final moments did he decide to return it. The shock of her soul's reunion was so powerful she dropped to her knees and lost consciousness, and with that the jailer departed Oribos, with Anduin at his heels. With the Primus returned to them, he could assist each covenant in forging new sigils to replace the power the jailer had stolen from each of the covenants. After the fall of Helya and Virus, the Primus was able to forge the sigil of Maldraxxus, now that the 5 houses stood united against the Maw. The Venthyr forged their sigil as they purged the aforementioned Nathrazim from their ranks. In doing so, they won the loyalty of the final remaining member of the Court of Harvesters, the Stone Rite, to their side. With her final medallion, the Medallion of Wrath, the medallions were collectively forged to do a new sigil for Revendreth. Bastion required a similar show of unity to reforge its sigil. The Archon sent word to her 5 paragons and temples, but the Temple of Loyalty remained in chaos, as its paragon, Devos, had been the one to lead the Forsworn and had since fallen in battle. Initially, the Archon sought to name Adrestes to this position, but after learning of Uther's story, Adrestes became convinced Bastion should not continue forward with the Paragon of Loyalty at all. It was rigid loyalty, after all, which had threatened Bastion and its allies, the Forsworn, against the path. Adrestes instead called for the temple to be renamed Devotion, and for the remaining Forsworn to be welcomed back into the ranks so they might learn from them. With this change, the sigil of Bastion was made anew. The sigil of Ardenweald came as the champions gathered to infuse the withered heart of the forest with anima. When Anduin had taken the sigil from the tree, it damaged the heart almost beyond repair, but with the rift healing between the Winter Queen and Elune, the forces of life and death had found new harmony. With their allies, including Tyrande by their side, they'd successfully infused the heart with anima and revived hope for Ardenweald, and in so doing, forged a new sigil. One moment. Where am I? I don't remember how to get there. How do I get there? I don't remember how to get to Zereth. How do I get to Zereth Mortis? I don't remember. I feel like it's a portal in here, but I don't remember where. Is it up top? Is it down below? I actually don't know where to go in WoW. Do you know how goddamn rare that is? Do you know how extraordinarily unlikely it is that I don't know where I'm going in this game? You can tell I've been to Zereth Mortis a lot. There it is. Yep, that's it, that's it. Thank you, the Count. Let's go ahead and scooch it here. I didn't like this zone. I don't really have a really good reason to explain why. I just didn't. I was not into it. Didn't work for me. I guess I could say that about a lot of zones in this game, couldn't I? Ah, well. Yeah, let's get a nice shot here. There we go. Access to Zereth Mortis was long ago forbidden by the denizens of Shadowlands, as it was considered sacred and fundamental to their beliefs regarding the First Ones. According to their mythos, the First Ones had intended Zereth Mortis to be their workshop, the place from which they craft various afterlives. Any interference with it could have drastic implications for the complex machinery of death. But, yeah, true enough, the count, I'll give you that one. But, with these grim developments, the Primus summoned the champions of Azeroth to Oribos, where he forged a new sigil for the Arbiter. Using the reforged set of sigils, the champions could travel to the Forbidden Realm and pursue the jailer to the sepulchre of the First Ones. The Primus suggested sending forth a forward party of champions through the portal first, to gain a foothold in the realm before leading the full might of allied armies through. Though the champions faced an arduous journey, they were accompanied by at least one denizen of the Shadowlands, Pelagos, the Kyrian who had seen them through much of their time in Bastion. They were grateful for the help, as chaos awaited on the other side of the portal. In Zereth Mortis, swarms of Forsworn were leading siege to the region's complex machinery, as well as the automata who attended to this realm. The jailer's forces immediately targeted the champions, disabling their way home. Seeing no way out but through, the champions and Pelagos sought out to explore this strange new realm, eventually crossing paths with the broker Furim. After helping the broker obtain a unique automa core, Furim brought the champions back to Haven, where dwelled a faction of brokers known as the Enlightened. Unlike most brokers, the Enlightened dealt not in profit of glory, but the pursuit of knowledge, seeing themselves as guardians of the First One's marvels. At Haven, the champions met the Elders, the leaders of the Enlightened. After helping the Enlightened drive back the jailer's forces, they found and activated an ancient waystone to open a path between Zereth Mortis and Oribos. This permanent connection would enable the allied forces of death to bring their greatest fighters through and challenge the Forsworn directly. I'm almost always invisible, Spartan. That's standard operating procedure. Upon witnessing this, along with all the champions had done to aid them, the Elder Ara of Enlightened agreed to join their forces with those of the heroes. While learning about this mysterious place, the champions noted the Forsworn converged on the Forge of Afterlives, prodding its defenses. While a sprawling battle ensued at the forge between the allied and Forsworn forces, the champion was left to handle confusion amongst their ranks. Mal'Ganis had disguised himself as the champions to infiltrate their forces and to sow confusion. In rooting out the Nothrazim, however, it became apparent this too was just deployed to buy time. The champions returned to the forge to find Anduin subduing a strange creature, an oracle known as Dasuni. The corrupted king was forcing the jailer's domination magic upon them and turning the creature into Forsworn. The jailer arrived, instructing the oracle to destroy the sole remaining obelisk defending the forge from intruders. This action shattered the final protection on the Forge of Afterlives, and a harmonic channel appeared to take Anduin and the jailer inside the sepulchre of the First Ones. Oh my god. It's just tiring. I want, listen, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to kill me. Just, and we're done. And we're done. We're done. My god. You know, fun fact, I was so de-invested in Shadowlands and didn't care so much that there's only one raid in the history of this entire game I have never done. Yeah. Anyways. Just gonna move on from that here. I'm gonna go over this way a bit. Just a few pages. I'll get it. I'll get it. I swear I'm gonna make it. Literally, like 4 pages. 4 pages. I can do it. I can do it. While tamping down the Devourers and Forsworn besieging Zereth Mortis and assisting the brokers caught in the crossfire, Uther met the players. No, that actually says players. I think that's a mistake. I think someone screwed up somewhere. You probably shouldn't refer to the champions or the heroes in universe as the players. That's funny. That's funny. I'm not even joking. Uther met the players in Haven. After surrendering himself to the Archon's justice, the paladin had worked diligently to redeem himself and find the peace he had once sought. This had been helped greatly by the champion, who had found and returned Uther's remaining soul fragment amid the reforging of Bastion's sigil. 217, Ross. No, I actually do have more work to do. You know me. With a unique insight into a situation, the paladin turned his efforts to Sylvanas. When the jailer had reunited Sylvanas' soul, he had condemned her to endless torment as the part of her soul who had become the Banshee Queen and battled the Ranger General. In an endless cycle, these two separate halves watched the atrocities the Banshee Queen had committed. They fought each other, unwilling to accept that the pain Sylvanas had caused and thought justified was only enabled an enemy of all creation. Though she had no allies in her current predicament, Bolvar insisted she could still prove a valuable asset. She was the only one who knew the full scope of the jailer's plans, and might know of a way to save Anduin from the jailer's domination. Uther had turned him down a dark path. Uther had looked on her more kindly. He understood how the jailer's message and fragmentation of his soul had turned him down a dark path. Though the others could not know that torment, Uther could, and he touched his hand to the wound in his own soul to convene with her more directly. Entering the battle raging in Sylvanas' mind, Uther explained to her that the jailer would win in every sense should she fail to accept the Banshee Queen's shattered legacy and all the consequences it bore. Shortly afterwards, Sylvanas reawakened, seeking to help the champions. After working once more with Elder Ara to construct an ancient translocator between the Sepulchre and the Zereth Mortis, the champions at last found their way into the Sepulchre, but stood little chance without a ray to resist domination. At the threshold of the Sepulchre, they met with Sylvanas, who told the champions she believed Anduin was the key. If they could break the jailer's hold on him, he would help with their efforts. Since he had been the one to wield Kingsmorn against the young king, it was possible Sylvanas could help the king find his way back to his allies. Though this offer was met with skepticism, Uther understood and vouched for her. She represented their best hope. The journey to reach Anduin was as difficult and dangerous as they expected it to be. At the Sepulchre, it seemed the very essence of creation was being devoured. Should it collapse, reality itself would be unmade. The champions fought through the Sepulchre's defenses, which were desperate to eliminate any aberration from its machine, Mossworn or otherwise. The greatest of the Devourers ravaged this place alongside the fallen Oracle and an artificer who led the Mossworn. All fell before the heroes, who fought even the principal architect of the supposed First Ones, whom the Shadowlands worshipped. Lihuvim and the prototype pantheon of each Eternal One. At last they found themselves before Anduin and at domination's grasp. There we go. Having to injure their friend in order to save him toward the heroes. Even when it seemed they had defeated the young king, he fell to his knees to summon further strength. The jailer refused to give up his prize. As Anduin used Kingsmorn to release domination magic upon his friends, the Mournblade began pulling Anduin's soul into it. Such was the fate of all who wielded the jailer's Mournblades. All seemed lost, but then, just as it had on the Broken Shore, the light sent Anduin a vision! He was not alone. The two who last wielded Charlemagne nobly stood beside him, his father Varian and the orc Varrock. This reminder of valor and honor gave Anduin strength to resist the jailer long enough to separate the single Kingsmorn into the two swords that had originally been combined to create Charlemagne. In doing, the soul that had powered and bound the blades together was released. This shard had once belonged to Arthas Menethil, the fragment Devos and Uther had brought to the Maw upon his death. The jailer in his malevolence had been using the fallen Prince of Lordaeron to empower Anduin's blade. Now, the last remainder had been depleted. Anduin had been freed from the jailer's grip, but he was broken by all the jailer had forced him to do and unable to offer information on how to counteract its magics. Since the Primus had created the Helm of Domination, the champions hoped he could forge it into an artifact that might resist the same magic. Bolvar, Darren, Sylvanas, and Anduin lent their memories of domination resistance to Primus that they might prove useful. With their power, he crafted the Crown of Wills, which could successfully resist domination magic. About frickin' time. In Oribos, the Eternal Ones pondered the problem of the Arbiter. As long as there was no Arbiter, the souls would continue to flow into the Maw, and the anima drought would continue. That's bad design, I'm just saying. The Maw is just the pit, I guess, the garbage pit, you know? That's whatever. That's a good shot. Fortunately, Pelagos and the champions of Azeroth had already lent their strength to finding a new one, accompanying the new Oracle Sezra to retrieve an empty vessel of an Eternal One from the resonant peaks of Zereth Mortis. Still, the question remained of a soul to empower the vessel. Here Sezra bade them accompany her to the crypts of the Eternal to select one. However, they had to fight people? Why is this even being mentioned here? However, the crypts were guarded and swarmed with Mossworn. Okay. And then even after securing entrance, and commencing the ritual, the lingering forces threaten it, summoning the soul of Argus the Unmaker. Okay. After defeating Argus yet again and assessing the damage, Pelagos volunteered to supply his own soul for the ritual to become the new Arbiter. He'd seen and felt so much in his travels, and his innate compassion had only grown. He had not yet ascended, and now saw a new purpose in this. He was a noble soul, and Cesroy accepted his willing sacrifice. Thus, a new Arbiter was created, the one who used not only absolute knowledge of a soul, but also compassion to assign them their proper place in the afterlife. By the time the heroes returned to the Sepulchre, the machine of origination at the heart of the complex was on the verge of full activation. The jailer was a breath away from the goal he had sought for millennia. He needed only to hold off the invaders a moment longer. He put forth his remaining champions, the Dreadlords Mal'Ganis. Why is any Nothrazim at this point following him? Oh, that's right, because Denathrius is still loyal to him for no explained reason. And Contessa and Rigellan, a Constellar whom Jailer could corrupt. How did he corrupt a Constellar? When even these fell before the heroes, he saw his domination magic had no effect on him. The Jailer was forced to fight the champions himself. And his dick was so big, like he's so much stronger than a Titan, you have no idea. This is the final battle of the entire Warcraft saga right here, against What's-His-Face. The heroes arrived at the heart of eternity just as the Jailer began the final step, attuning the machine of origination to his will. As he worked to attune the machine, the heroes doggedly attacked, desperate to save their reality, but this alone was not enough. The Jailer successfully attuned the machine, which began a terrifying process. From the bowels of Icecrown Citadel in Northrend, intricate machinery awoke, siphoning the life force of Azeroth to fuel the unmaking of reality. In a race against time, the heroes poured everything they had into the Jailer's destruction. With great effort, they felled the Eternal One, and the Jailer collapsed, despairing and defeated. As the Jailer fell to his knees, he remembered his final moments before his imprisonment in the Maw. The anger, scorn, and censure upon the faces of his brothers and sisters. Now facing his own end, the Jailer recalled back to what had motivated him since the beginning. He had seen something terrible coming for all reality. A force that divided cosmos could not hope to counter. Bobby Kotick. Sorry. Without drastic action, none would survive. With these words, the last remnant of the Jailer faded away, leaving only an automa in its place. With the machine of origination shut down, Azeroth's life force was restored, and indeed, all reality was saved. We did it! We saved the entirety of reality. We're so good. Isn't that just... Don't you feel so accomplished? Upon the death of their leader, the remaining Forsworn scattered. Across the realm of the dead, its allied citizens celebrated. The rifted sky over Icecrown closed, and there was a wholeness, too, in many other places where there had once been great division. The tyranny of the Jailer was over. Pelagos' first act as arbiter was to preside over the trial of Sylvanas Windrunner. Sylvanas was guilty of great crimes, that much was certain, and she did not deny she committed each of them of her own free will. However, she, like many others throughout time, had been deceived by the Jailer. She regretted the crime she had committed in the Jailer's service, and she had done everything she could to assist in his demise. Hearing something in her tone, Pelagos noted the Banshee Queen knew to whom she must answer. She chose Tyrande Whisperwind, knowing full well the High Priestess and her people had suffered more at her hands than any others. Whatever Tyrande decreed as punishment, Sylvanas would accept. Sylvanas knew that death would be too lenient, even as she knew she deserved it. While Tyrande was not about to forgive and forget, she reluctantly recognized that Sylvanas had changed. With part of her soul restored, she was no longer the same woman who burned Teldrassil. Tyrande sentenced Sylvanas to punishment that would shackle her freedom and remind her every moment of what she'd done, but would also allow her to undo some of it. Sylvanas would return to the Maw, track down the souls wrongfully sent there, and return to Oribos for proper judgment. Returned the soul to Oribos for proper judgment. Sylvanas accepted this sentence without protest, venturing into the Maw to begin a task that would take her eons to complete. Seeing balance restored, the rest of Azeroth's heroes returned to the world they held so dear, hoping to heal it after decades of suffering and war. I mean, we do have the Breather expansion next, where we have to save the world from... Oh. Can we stop saving the world? I feel like the maid. Of all Azeroth's inhabitants, only one had chosen not to return home. Sometime after his allies' departure, Anduin Wrynn had appointed the legendary General Tyrellian as Lord Commander of the Alliance forces and Regent of Stormwind. Yes, it is, Ross. He was sure the Paladin would serve his people and the forces of light dutifully and well while he journeyed. Anduin could not help but feel shame for the deeds he had committed while under the yoke of the Jailer. He had not made the choice to turn on his allies, but some small part of him had thrilled at the bloodshed and the chaos that ensued while battling Azeroth's greatest heroes. Anduin worried that the experience had somehow tainted his soul, that if he called out to the light, it may not answer him. Under this shadow, he did not feel he deserved to be any kind of king, much less the leader of the Alliance, so he sought out one of the few souls who might understand his guilt. Deep within the maw, he met with Sylvanas, who was carrying out her charge of sending souls to Oribos for judgment. She was surprised to see him. She listened as he spoke his fears openly and responded with what insight she gleaned through her own experience. Sylvanas acknowledged her responsibility in her actions, noting that she found peace in doing her work, moving steadily, if slowly, forward. After a moment of thought, Anduin thanked Sylvanas for her words. She had told him what he needed to hear. He bade her farewell, and each went their own way. Anduin was unsure of so much, but Sylvanas had tacitly given him the understanding that uncertainty was part of the journey. He too would do the work. It was time for him to move on. And back in Azeroth, a new era was set to begin, to be continued. Mic drop. Ladies and gentlemen, that has been the Warcraft Chronicles Volume 4. Here's my summary of this goddamn book. I'm kind of serious. This is trash. I'm sorry. I tried very hard, especially early on, to be funny and interesting and try to keep the thing alive and chat about it, but it just wore on me because it was just this non-stop cavalcade of bad writing, bad editing, irritating retcons, and I was left with one feeling more than any other throughout the course of the whole thing. And I know this is going to sound very funny, but I found myself wondering, what was the goddamn point of that thing? Now, hear me out. I have an answer for my own question. Oh, by the way, check this out. You want to see contrast in city design? Think about Oribos compared to this freaking place. Valdrakken is just crushes Oribos. Like, even in gameplay, but also in narrative style. Just absolutely crushes it. Sorry, unrelated. So... That's kind of a cool outfit. You're probably going to say, and I'm sure, I can't wait. I can't wait for the negative comments. I really can't. It's going to be great. But I'm sure you're going to say, rightfully so, even, that the point of this book was to serve as a summary of WoW's story. And at that task, it has failed miserably. And I think that's my actual frustration there. It's because I understand the desire and the value of trying to provide a concrete summary of a story. It's also a tremendous amount of work, effort, time, care, crafting, research, double-checking, triple-checking. I should know. I've done that! World of Warcraft plug. So, that was a huge endeavor. And that was just my stupid little ass taking random footage, well, actually very, very carefully crafted footage shots, and trying to do a narration that did a good job of summarizing the entire story of the entire game. And then deciding what to keep and what to start, blah, blah, blah. And that book fails. Part 1 succeeded mostly, I think, because it was all about the history and the world. And it felt like it was a manual, an encyclopedia of the Warcraft setting. Part 2 succeeded in part because it was a retelling of games that aren't really contiguous, that never really received the retcons in one cohesive place that have happened since then. But Part 3 and 4 both suck for the same reason. They're just a book at this point. They've stopped being an encyclopedia. They've stopped being a reference source. It's just a summary of WoW expansions. And again, I should know, summarizing something with the sheer depth and breadth of this game takes a lot of effort and time that they did not succeed at. And that's my final thoughts on that. Tomorrow, at some point in time, I'm not going to commit to a deadline, we're going to go ahead and start the streaminations with Arcane. I hope to see at least some of you there.